everybody, it's Romania Black, and I've been told on Twitter and a few comments on YouTube that I shouldn't be shipping Einar and Thorfinn because they're just two bros, man. Why are you shipping them? They're not in love. And to that I say, in tune with the mangaka, gay Vikings are real. No. Sup, it's Romania Black. Oh my god. I did a dare from the Discord about dressing up as a bro. This is my version of a bro. I've got like a Pokemon cosplay hat from Pokemon White and this. But yeah, so I hope y'all are having a great night. I am. We're watching episode 3 of Vinland Saga. But no, I actually have had a couple comments on Twitter and on YouTube talking about like me shipping. One, welcome to my channel. I like to ship things. But we talked about this in the Discord. Shipping is kind of a unique thing where I like to multi-ship. Basically, it's when I ship something, it is introducing romance into an otherwise romanceless setting. And if that is the case, what better place to ship than Vinland Saga, where there is very little romance, hardly any consensual sex, and very big amounts of tension throughout the entire story. So when I ship things, it's all in good fun. And I do it just because it's fun. I enjoy it. But do I think there's going to be an erotic sex scene between Thorfinn and Einar in this season? Hell no. The ratings would go up, but no, I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think that it is fun to recognize that I hope Einar and Thorfinn will develop a very close relationship with one another. Obviously, it's not going to be romantic. However, I do want to make note. I've got several comments, and kind of what spurred this was that after seeing those comments on Twitter and on YouTube, I found an old piece of note paper that was actually from the end of season 1 and had a couple of comments that I meant to bring up in the very first episode of season 2, but I forgot. So I'm bringing them up now, but I've got several comments before the start of this, so I'm glad y'all humored me, hopefully, through that. But JV Ever talked about Asklad back in season 1 being a father figure to both Canute and Thorfinn, except ironically enough, he's responsible for the death of both of their father figures and Canute's actual father. And Thorfinn's actual father. So it's very interesting, right? In the same vein, Edgar talked about how Asklad didn't tell Thorfinn the truth about Floki. And I wondered this back in season 1 why he didn't do this. And Edgar posited it's because in the end, had he told him about Floki, he would have just become someone else that Thorfinn struggled to get revenge over. And Asklad probably was like, yeah, you need to move on from revenge, so let's not do that. But the reason why I dressed up as the bro and did all of that was because of Ridasante's comment saying that Yukimura, the mangaka himself, said that one of his headcanons was that Bjorn was gay. And that Karl Sefni, the nickname given to Thorfinn, means making of a man. And honestly, knowing that the mangaka, because I've heard the mangaka Yukimura is a pretty progressive guy. He seems like he's the nicest person in the world, and I want to meet him. I feel like it's very cool that he made Bjorn homosexual because it adds a real life variety to the people and their sexualities in this show. Because yeah, people that are not heterosexual, people of all sexual varieties have been around since the dawn of time. You know, it's not, go read Sappho. So yeah, it's nice. It's weird when people say, oh, well, there's no way that they could be gay. I'm like, you don't know that, because they could be, right? Because, Bjorn in this case, I like that it adds a layer to his character, especially in regards to his final fight with Asklad. And if you follow him throughout the series, seeing what he thought of Asklad and knowing that there could have been a romantic subtext behind that, it adds a whole new meaning to his character. So yeah, I like that the mangaka is very smart and realizes that yes, chances are there were some gay Vikings back in the olden times. Here's someone that could have been. So yeah. But again, it's all in good fun, my shipping All in good fun. So in any case, I have some comments from last episode. Whoosh and Sweebian noted that Olmar's VA is Tanaka from Haikyuu. And I liked Whoosh and Sweebian's comment that Olmar is kind of a contrast because, you know, he's technically free. He's grown up spoiled in this household. He's a good contrast to Thorfinn now. In the last episode's discussion, I kind of talked about Thorfinn and Olmar growing up and the circumstances. Now, Thorfinn's circumstance is much different from Olmar. And that Olmar is a bit spoiled and technically free by privilege, whereas Thorfinn is a slave. Also, I like the idea of the angry... Einar is angry at the Danes and himself for not being able to protect his family. Olmar is trapped in his obligations, seeking fame in battle. And Thorfinn, he's kind of, you know, coming from both sides, Olmar and Einar. He's seen so much bloodshed, and he's wasted all this time looking for revenge that he has nothing left to show for it. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have any family he can go back to that he thinks. And his past demons have kind of all come to the surface. And Whoosh and Sweebian notes that the hands of the dead in the OP, they viewed them as pulling Thorfinn down into this river, as the OP is described, of pain. And so I thought that was pretty cool. Johannes Iche says that the poem in episode 1 is in the poetic Edda of old Nordic poems, and it means sayings of the High One, the carved poem, and it's attributed to Odin. And so it's supposed to be teaching a lesson as a nomadic poem, and usually those nomadic poems are used to teach very customary things in that culture. Ridasante also notes that Einar, you know, he had more time with his family to kind of develop his moral code. So when we see him, he's a little bit stronger morally and mentally because he's an adult. Whereas Thorfinn was kind of stripped away from his family at age 6. So he's not really had that same amount of time to mature and develop his moral code like Einar has. So that's pretty good to point out. Anita Meyer made a really cool comment about Einar being proud of his tree cutting in episode 1 versus Thorfinn just having to do it because he's a slave. Both started out wanting to accomplish something and ended up in a bad situation because of their inability to truly accomplish these goals. Einar's lack of battle experience made him lose it all. Thorfinn's burden to become a murderer for revenge. These are all choices that led them to a position of loss, and now with nothing to lose, they have to start over. So I thought that was really well phrased, Anita. That was a great comment. And then finally, and I know this intro has been longer than usual, Alexander Q said that Canute in the OP, with all the blood on him, is no longer innocent or delicate. He looks more like a king. The facial hair doesn't hurt, right? And so symbolically, I like the idea of carving it, as Alexander Q says, even leaving the bloody mark on the innocent baby's cheek. Like, that's just such a symbolic moment. It's very ominous. And then we go back to Askeladd's big saying back in season 1. Everybody's a slave to something. So what is Einar a slave to? My theory is Einar is a slave to the concept of freedom and wanting to be free. But what do we do with that? So I thought those were great comments. I'm pretty excited to get into this episode, see what all we get. But cheers, y'all. I'm pretty excited. This is a soda, by the way. I'm not going full frat boy for this one. I could, but I'm not. So I'm pretty excited. On Tuesdays and Mondays and Tuesdays, I stay off of social media. I'm like, I don't even want to see. I don't want to know what's up because I want to come into this episode being as surprised as possible. Last episode, we got to see Olmar's situation as well as Einar and Thorfinn's. It's not great on Kettle's farm, even though things on the surface seem okay. So we'll just see how that pans out, right? So in any case, we're going to find out what happens in episode 3 of season 2 of Vinland Saga. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. All right. I'm here for Snake. I'm here for a hot brunette with green eyes. Let's do this. No, I honestly, the title of the episode being called Snake, what I thought it was referring to is Fox and Badger, which I thought was kind of funny because usually foxes and badgers, like, they eat snakes. So, or they kill snakes. So it's funny that we kind of have the reversal happen where Snake is the one that's intimidating to the fox and the badger. So it's like, okay, that's a cool, like, little twist. And the fact that Snake refers to the man instead of just the theme of the episode is really good too. But man, Thorfinn, I wondered about the ear getting cut off because, and I'm glad nobody said anything, because in the OP, in the ED, you see him without the ear. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, did he ever lose part of his ear? And I convinced myself that he lost it to Thorkel for some reason. But then watching the episode, like, his hair got pushed back at one point and you saw the ear, and I'm like, no, it's still intact. And so it didn't dawn on me that, no, the ED has his ear getting chopped from Fox. I'm like, okay, man, episode doing a lot of thematic things. And I feel like we're getting closer and closer to more stuff with Thorfinn, right? I've been waiting for Thorfinn, like, to fill in the gaps, but Thorfinn says some things in this episode. I'm like, really? Dude. But, God, Thorfinn just doesn't have any motivation to live anymore. He's just like, I don't know. And Einar, I'm ready for Einar to just whip out a Care Bear stare on our boy Thorfinn and be like, no, you have something to live for, damn it. And I'm just ready to hear what it is, right? But we're going to put Thorfinn. I'm going to put Thorfinn here. Our poor boy Thorfinn here. And we're going to put Einar here. We'll put Fox. Put Fox here. And I guess I'll kind of put and Badger out to the side. Because Badger doesn't do a whole lot. It's mainly Fox doing the talk in this. And then we have Olmar. And we have Snake. And then we get the one girl. She's apparently a slave. Surprising no one. To Kettle. His personal attendant. I'm like, oh, okay, show. You keep calling it that. You be classy as ever, right? But the whole thing with Fox and Badger is rather interesting. So they have this, like, Fight Club ring going on, which I guess they're just a bunch of dudes. You know what? If they're going to fight each other, I guess that's better than sexually assaulting women. So you guys just have at it, right? You just do whatever. But Fox is interesting because apparently these guys are bodyguards of Kettle. Like, they are hired as guests. Which is curious because Fox and Badger, they're guests, right? I'm going to put that in quotation marks. But Snake talked about he has a gramps and seems to live there. Put a question mark by that. So yeah, that's curious. We don't really know what to do with that, but they have this fighting ring where they talk about the idea of Olmar. Olmar gets drunk frequently. We get the idea that he is drunk a lot, right? Because Fox makes the comment that Olmar's not a fun drunk today. He's being a sad drunk. So he gets drunk quite often, and they usually use this time to, like, kind of poke fun at him, and if he's entertaining, it's entertaining, right? And Olmar's thing is that he just feels he's different and misunderstood, right? That's his whole big deal, is that nobody understands where he's coming from. Nobody gets, he's like, he's got privileged Dane problems, and nobody understands, right? But Fox and them, they're just there to poke fun, right? They're just poking fun at Olmar. And Fox makes this comment. He's like, well, he says, you're 17. What does he say there? He makes a big comment about 17. And at the moment I was like, oh my gosh. He says, not quite an adult, but no longer a child. And God, when you think about it, that line about being 17, in season 1, Thorfinn and Canute were 17. Not quite an adult, but no longer a child. And that is such a perfect encapsulation of Thorfinn and Canute at that time period. So it's funny that Fox mentions that, right? But he says that Olmar, to become a man, he has to kill. he has to kill someone. This is where the conversation kind of gets interesting. Fox's whole mentality about it. And, Olmar blames him for mocking him and laughing at him. And he's like, I've never seen you do your job, Fox. Oh, and so Fox says we're bored out of our minds. So Olmar notes that Fox doesn't do his job. And the thing about it is, the funny thing is that Olmar wants to go into battle, but he has no experience killing anyone. And I don't think he really even wants to kill somebody. He just wants to get away from home and live his own life. And the only way he sees that being feasible is if he goes to battle and leaves home. That's the only way he feels like he can be in control of his own destiny rather than his father being in control of what he ends up doing. And it's a relatable feeling of Olmar having, of being in the shadow of your parents' expectations and wanting to do your own thing. He's in that rebellious teenage phase, right? It makes sense. But Fox and Badger, they quickly overpower him, which, one, he's not that skilled, and two, he's drunk. So they were talking about sobering up. It's like, we're supposed to have fun drinking together so Kettle's family will like us. Fox is like, we're supposed to be making a good impression and making friends with them. And so Fox is like, listen, you're a kid. He's like, becoming a real man isn't that difficult. That's the interesting thing, is that Fox says it's not hard. It's not hard. I would agree, it's not hard to kill somebody, but I would say that we look back down at Thor's and Askeladd and even Thorkel, and their views with foxes are very different, right? Because you had Thor said that real men / warriors, he said they don't have to use a sword. Don't have to use a sword. We'll touch back on this. So he says real men and warriors don't have to use a sword to be strong, right? Askeladd said that real men, and I'm paraphrasing, but that real men know when to kill. They don't just blindly go in, stabby left and right, like what Thorfinn was doing half of season 1. Askeladd's like, you know when to kill, you know what to do. It's methodical, you plan it out. You just don't go and ruthlessly, recklessly do it without reason or purpose. And Thorkel said that essentially, they didn't say this verbatim, but it was basically like, the battle and its structure. Like, I kept thinking back to whenever after Canute's father died, Thorkel's like, well, you have to kill Askeladd. Here's the hard part. This is what you have to do here. Now you have to do this. Like, Askeladd, Thorkel, and Thors knew how the system worked. And becoming a man wasn't just randomly killing a slave. No, it was either defending yourself and your family from a force that was trying to hurt them, or it had purpose behind it, right? Fox, the way he describes it is, you just kill somebody. There doesn't have to be a purpose behind it. You just have to kill and understand. To him, he says that by killing, you understand how fragile humans are. And then you're not afraid. Once you see how fragile they are, you're not going to be afraid of them. Which is why when Thorfinn is just like, nah, man, I'm not scared of you, it kind of throws Fox for a loop, because Thorfinn is defying everything Fox just told Olmar. Thorfinn's like, no, I'm not scared. And he's defying that whole fragility of humanity that Fox just said everybody has. So it's fascinating to see him try to give this to Olmar as an out. And he's like, we'll just kill the slaves because they don't matter. It's like you're just picking the most random, defenseless thing and just giving yourself an out. It's so maybe the OP. I am going to be excited for when eventually Thorfinn and Einar get this really sweet facial hair. Because I'm not going to lie, they both look pretty damn good with it. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for them to get this facial hair. Let's do it. But they're not there yet. They just got the 5 o'clock shadow. Man, I will say it's Vinland Saga. What a man's man show. We show guys peeing every 5 minutes. You know, just this is our time of contemplation when we're at the bathroom. Clearly. And so Einar still believes that he believes in Kettle's promise that we're going to get that wheat field, we're going to get our money. Because he's talking about, he comes to the realization, rightfully so, that they're wasting time. That they're wasting time in the wheat field. Because, yeah, they're wasting all this time harvesting the wheat. They're not going to have time to clear the forest. That's the point. He's like, we've got to do a lot of things. We got to dig up the roots. We got to let everything rest. He's talking about possibly borrowing a till. Einar thinks that it's still feasible for them to pay off their debt, right? And buy themselves their freedom. And it's like, no, it's not at this point, but you keep telling yourself that. And then poor Thorfinn having night terrors, ultimate PTSD night terrors. And so Thorfinn having the bad dreams. He's like, well, Einar says, if they're bad dreams, if you just if you don't remember them, that means they need to be forgotten. But Thorfinn says otherwise. He says that it's something he's not supposed to forget. He keeps having these bad dreams because it's something he needs to remember. And I feel like we're getting closer and closer to figuring that out. Thorfinn's been, he was a husk of himself in episode 1. Einar is slowly, dragging him back up. And he's slowly going to get to that point, I feel, that we're going to get some backstory of what led him up to this point. And Einar's just like, oh, okay. He's like, what kind of dream makes a man scream like that? Well, our boy Thorfinn's been through quite a bit. So I'd say there's several things that can make him do that. Right? I just love that Einar has this really sweet smile on his face. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy, old pal. Come on, Thorfinn. He's just he's like a labradoodle. And then he sees our lady friend. Look, here's the thing. Y'all make fun of me for shipping Einar and Thorfinn. I do ship Einar with this slave girl. I hope they make it out. I don't have high hopes for her. Because the series is cruel. I don't think she's long for this world, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe she'll get lucky. Maybe she'll be all right. Women in this series, am I right? They just don't have a good track record. I also want to make note, Thorfinn's not interested in the ladies whatsoever. Thorfinn might as well be asexual at this point. Not interested. But, Einar, he's totally crushing, right? And Thorfinn feels like he's on edge, probably from the dream. But Einar's saying washing his face won't make it better. I'm like, Einar, you're a good-looking guy. Quit. Who you fooling? Because the lady's like, a little self-loathing, self-deprecating humor. All okay. She's like, I think you have a wonderful face. That's all he needed to know. He's just like, oh, I love that he's clutching his chest okay, it's fine. It's just, I'm feeling something here. It's love, but he's having a crush. Could be heartburn, could be infatuation. But Thorfinn, I love that you see the scars on his hands as he wrings out the water. There's some great shots of Thorfinn in this episode, just his expression and his eyes. Again, his eyes are like Thor's, and it's so crazy to see, once they're not a feral little gremlin dog, they look so soft. I love it. I must have been dreaming about something I mustn't forget. And so we find out from her, she's like, oh, you're from England. Her name is Arnheid. Again, these ladies have such weird names. Arnheid is his crush. Go, Einar. Rooting for you, bud. But she says, she's like, why? She's like, your accent's so thick. Which it makes sense when he says they were Nordic, but when they came there, the English invaded, and then the Danes came on top of it, which kind of, in reality, sucks. Because you know what that means? It means the Danes basically just slaughtered their own people. They were just relabeled English, and they slaughtered them without any consideration. Should we be surprised? No. But it's it's really sad because he's like, we're basically bilingual. We speak the language of the Danes as well as the English, right? And so while Thorfinn's like figuring out his mild existential crisis, she's like, I'm the master's personal attendant, and she's a slave too. It's like, you keep classy, show. But she seems all right. She seems like she's doing fine. And then this Fox guy, the thing about it is, they basically, Fox and them came to get Einar and Thorfinn. He said they've been there since summer, so it's fall. So they've been there a few months. They've at least been there a few months, right? We don't know how long Thorfinn's been there. Could be much longer. But Fox comes to get them both because he thinks, oh, well, you guys are newbies. Nobody's going to miss you. You guys are just out in the woods chopping wood. Nobody's going to care. And takes them away. And so, I love that Einar's like, we're having a busy morning. I'm like, it's about to get much busier. And I like that he comes over, he's like, Thorfinn, bro, who are these guys? And Thorfinn has no idea. He's like, they've got swords. And Thorfinn knows enough to know what guests mean, that they're bodyguards. He knows just enough. And Einar, all he can think about is Arnheid. And so he's in a good mood. But they go up here on the hill, and the thing about it is, Olmar has sobered up at this point, right? He's no longer drunk. So you can definitely tell that Olmar, he's not really enthusiastic about killing, right? And I almost wonder if Fox and Badger were trying to get him to kill one of the slaves so that he wouldn't want to leave, because maybe it would leave a foul taste in his mouth. And then he'd be like, oh, I don't want to go now. I don't want to do anything like that. I want to just stay here. Maybe that was their motivation. I don't know why else they were doing it except for their own enjoyment. It really doesn't make sense. But Olmar, I'm kind of like, I wanted Olmar to just be like, oh, I don't want to do it. But he's under so much peer pressure. Like, all the guys are there like, go, go, go. And so Olmar's kind of under this peer pressure. And he doesn't want to be the odd one out. And Einar is just like, excuse me. Einar is definitely appalled. He is appalled that they are targets. He's like, we didn't do anything. He's like, we didn't do a single thing. We've been doing our work. We haven't tried to escape or do anything awful. And Fox is like, yeah, whatever, your property. We can do whatever we want to you. And it's just so awful. I'm like, screw you, Fox. And Thorfinn's just like, yeah, I know how this song and dance goes. And I love that Einar, he tells Thorfinn to run and tries to like get Thorfinn to where he can escape. And obviously Thorfinn's not going anywhere. But I love that Thorfinn's like, what a pain. Thorfinn's like, what a pain. So I like the idea that Einar, he tries to save Thorfinn. The funny thing about it is that in this episode, Thorfinn kind of channels his father and Askeladd in different ways, right? In different ways. That what a pain line, that is pure Askeladd. That is pure Askeladd. Where it's like, what a pain. Like, he's not snarky like Askeladd, and he's not over the top jovial about battle like Thorkel, but that what a pain line is just the right amount of snark to be Askeladd. And it's rather interesting. But then he has this like Zen approach, like Thor's, where he's like, look, he can cut me down. Let him go back to work. And everybody just kind of stops and is like, what? He's like, just let him go back to work. You only need one of us, right? Let him return to work. So it's funny that just like Thor's, he tries to protect Einar by offering himself, right? Which is very similar to what Thor's did, offering himself, in place of the village to go along with Floki and the others. It's fascinating, right? So then we cut over here to Snake. We got this house. There's garlic and stuff hanging outside. And we have in this house, sitting there with a book over his head, right? Like he's been reading, is Snake. So Snake is, as far as we know, literate, unless he's faking it. So he's literate. In this house, he is the boss of the guards. So I'm imagining that maybe the Gramps there is just some old man that's let them use that house, and they're just kind of pent up there for now. And he's just kind of like he's not helping the Gramps harvest the wheat or anything. But I want to see if there's any hint about the book he was reading. He kind of has like an Einar vibe where he was just like, oh, it's morning. He's like just kind of lazy about it. And he has a scar above his head. Huh. And then he's like, oh, come on. He's like, I'm not cooking for you. Figure something out yourself. And he's like, that old fart. I'm not cooking for myself. What a pain in the butt. Oh, no. I guess I'll head home. Okay. So he's not really home. He was just hanging out at the old man's house because the old man probably had a book, right? Okay. So let's make note. Snake is not cooking for anyone. He's not making you breakfast. Ladies, he might not be worth it. Joking. But yeah, I guess he'll head home. Huh. And that's when he shows up. So I like that Thorfinn's like, we've got a busy day ahead of us. Can you just let us go, please? Are we done here? And Fox feels like, I like this guy behind Fox has like the most ultimate mullet in this scene. But he's like, oh, this won't work. Because slaves are not supposed to be unafraid. He's like, you're supposed to fear us. He's like, that's the whole point. And so he gives this big speech. And Einar's like, what are you talking about? I like the motion of Olmar scurrying after his sword. And Fox is just like, we need to make an example of this one because he's going to give the slaves a bad idea festering in their head. When he said, I'm sorry, what's your name again? I was really hoping that he would recognize Thorfinn from a tale of something. But I guess, honestly, unless you were on the battlefield and knew Thorfinn firsthand, you probably wouldn't know who he was unless they described him as that little gremlin running around killing people. You probably wouldn't know who Thorfinn was. And he says, all right, Thorfinn, do you understand what you just said? Being cut down means dying. And Thorfinn's like, yes, it certainly does. I just love, it's like the zen of Thor's meets kind of the snark of Askeladd in this moment where he's like, yes, I know exactly what I said. Did I stutter? Like I need Samuel L. Jackson's voice over Thorfinn in this moment. Did I stutter? And Fox is like, and Einar is just like, what? Why are we doing this, Thorfinn? I told you to run. And Badger kicks him over. Telling him to stay out of this, even though he was the one whose life was being threatened, right? And so Fox, who's like a pretty tall guy, says you run into guys like him every once in a while. I can't overlook what you just said. And this is so interesting. He says, letting a remark like that slide reduces the value of our product. So he talks about how the product that he and the bodyguards create, the product is death, and thus fear of death. He's like, we can't do our job as bodyguards if people aren't afraid of us, because our mission is to protect our master, but also to kill our enemies. And so we need people to be afraid of us. If they're not afraid of us, then that makes our job quite difficult. So he's like, you're making our job difficult. And I guess all these guys are bodyguards. Like, do you know what product we warriors sell? So he calls them warriors. He says that they are warriors themselves. But again, I don't know if Thorfinn would agree with that. Thor's definitely wouldn't. Askeladd probably wouldn't. And he says, no. I love the idea when he says it's death. You could just, the way that Fox's face is drawn, I imagine in the manga, this big giant panel of his face. I just imagine it, right? Just sitting there. And Thorfinn looks up like, really? And Olmar has already peed his pants at this point. He's like, everyone is afraid to die. I can tell you for certain that everyone fears it. And he's like, look at the young master. Even he's afraid of someone else dying. Yeah, because Olmar is a nice person deep down, right? He doesn't want to kill anyone. He just wants to get away from home. You should be. Death has value because we fear it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to use our swords to make a living. And then I can't believe he just cuts Thorfinn, which granted, Thorfinn's been through worse. Thorfinn's been through some hellish stuff. So to this, I mean, and they're pretty shallow cuts. They're just going to scar him, but they're not like deep stabs. They're just shallow cuts across him. So Thorfinn's like, I've had worse. Although the ear cutting off is pretty extreme. And Thorfinn's just like, you should be scared too. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, no. I like Snake's just wandering to the, like, slowly back home. He's like, oh man, I'm hungry. And it's like, what? Those idiots are up to no good again. So yeah, he's the boss of them and he views his Fox and the others as idiots. Interesting. I'm curious his relationship in this whole deal because he's the boss of the bodyguards. So that's curious. I wonder where that's going to go. But yeah, they just keep cutting up our poor boy Thorfinn. Like, he does not deserve this. I was like, leave him alone. And Olmar's even like, this hurts to watch. Your tiny body would end up even smaller. Ugh. And Thorfinn at this point's like, And Snake even says it's impressive that he's not moving, right? He's got the cut on his face from the ED. He didn't blink. Impressive. I wonder if Snake is going to ask if he has had a past fighting with the Danes. I wonder if he's going to ask that because Thorfinn doesn't act like, you know, a regular slave or like Einar or a farmer. That the fact that he can withstand that, I wonder if Snake is going to bring that up and be like, do you have history? And what is that going to do with Einar if it gets brought up? Because, you know, the Danes kind of wrecked Einar's place. Like, how is that going to affect things if it gets brought up? So, I don't know. And he says, isn't that one of the master's slaves? So he's like, yeah, should we be really doing this? And then Thorfinn just doesn't care. And he says, why do we have to fear death? Now this part, where he says, why do we have to fear it? And then he says, do we live because we don't want to die? Like, Thorfinn has this thing, like, do we need to fear death? And he says, basically, why do we live? He's like, do we just live because we don't want to die? Is that all there is to it? Is that just all there is for living? And Einar's like, oh shit, he's in a lot deeper than I thought. Does anything good come from being alive? At this point, I was like, Thorfinn, no! But he's like, what good? What good comes from being alive? I was like, no, Thorfinn, don't be like that, please. Don't do that. And then he says this. Because Fox is like, you're no fun. Thorfinn says, not for me. And then it like pans out. And he goes, not a single good thing has happened to me in my entire life. So, he says, nothing good. All right. Thorfinn, I know you're sad. I know you're going through an emotional distress and you're at the bottom of the pit, but I just want to point out, as I point out in season 1, that some of these problems are kind of your fault. Obviously, everything from like age 6 and on has been a very bad state for Thorfinn. But I'm like, nothing good happened your entire life. Like, when you were a kid with your family, nothing ever. And there is a part of me that I always get kind of conflicted with Thorfinn because on the one hand, yeah, no, nothing good has happened to him. You could argue that, no. But then on the other hand, I'm like, some of that's kind of your own fault. And I'm like, you could have gone back with Leif. You could have gone home. You could have maybe seen your family and that would have been good. But you didn't. So I guess that's what he's getting at. I guess Thorfinn is saying not a good thing has happened to me my entire life. And my guess is, I think Thorfinn blames himself for it. I would hope that that's the case. And he's just kind of like in this sad state of depression, being like, nothing good's ever happened. I don't know what I'm living for. What's the point? But then he doesn't kill himself. So what is the point? You're living for something. What is it? There has to be a reason, right? That's the thing. Like, why are you living, Thorfinn? What's the point? You know, if you really think nothing good has ever happened to you, then why are you still living? What is keeping you going? Something's there. Something's driving you. And I feel like we're close to finding out what that is. Something is driving him and keeping him alive. But what is it? And I feel like we're getting close to finding that out. It's just, it's on the tip of our tongues, right? It's on the tip. And then, but then, yeah, Fox swings that damn sword and he says, your eye is next. It's so bizarre still to me seeing Thorfinn look like an adult. It's so bizarre seeing Thorfinn be an adult. I can't get over it. It's so weird to me seeing him not as a kid anymore. I don't know if I'll ever get over it. It's going to be weird if I go back and watch season 1 and see like little feral teenage Thorfinn. It's going to be so bizarre. But then Snake says to stop Fox, and Fox is like twitching. He is twitching. Like his eyes like go everywhere. Like Snake is obviously very intimidating. And he tells he's like, hey, Fox, come over here. And then punches the snot out of him. Being like, what are we doing? And then, yeah. And then our handsome Aragorn lookalike, Snake, comes up. And he's like, Badger, I want you to explain the situation. Yes, please. Thank you. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So I like Snake. I like him so far. Might change my mind on that. So far I like him. Fox and Badger, screw them. I feel for Olmar because Olmar really at the end of the day, he's just a teen. He's just a teen that doesn't know what he wants. And he thinks that he wants this certain thing when we, the audience, know, no, you don't. And he just hasn't realized that yet. Einar is a golden retriever in human form. And he's best boy. I love him. I want to give Thorfinn the biggest hug imaginable and been like, sweet baby boy, it's going to be all right. You need to get out of your funk. And so I feel like we're going to get there. It's just, we're in emo Thorfinn mode. We've had edgelord Thorfinn, gremlin Thorfinn, and now we're in emo Thorfinn phase. And so we just got to, he's in his cocoon. He's not emerged as the butterfly yet, right? But I think my favorite thing about this episode is just the discussion of what makes a man, because I feel like Fox's description of Olmar kind of flies in the face of what we've seen from Thor's Askeladd and Thorkel in the last season. So I find that rather interesting. And I feel like that theme of what makes a man is going to carry forward with Snake and Thorfinn and Einar. We're going to get Thorfinn's backstory of what's happened up until now at some point. And I feel like it's going to tie into that. So, I don't know. But I really liked this episode. It was really, really good. I'm very curious to know, now that Snake has entered the picture, what his role is going to be in this story. And I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, hints, or clues. But I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. But aside from that, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, fellow bros, I will see you next week for episode 4 of Vinland Saga. Cheers.